Hi, Miss Daisy.
I'm going to share your plans, because mine are on my counter.
Okay.
Oh my God, my neck just cracked.
I call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag.
Oh, yes, that's awesome.
Kidding?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could I have a roll call, please?
Julie Simpson.
Here.
Jason Tron.
Here.
Robin Cleek.
Here.
West Poland here. Sonali Patel.
Here.
Matt Jacobs.
Here.
6 present, 1 absent. So we are here for the next steps on our engagement. At the last meeting, when we talked, we had about 6 options. We narrowed them down based on our educators' feedback, some of the pricing that we had down to 2. Since then, a lot has happened. And one of the things that I have heard, and all of us have heard, I shouldn't say just I, has been that, you know, with our superintendent going, and we probably not going to have a full-time superintendent for next year, and just being with an interim, with whom we haven't chosen or hired as yet, is we should not do anything with the referendum. One of the things I want to say, I'll give some points of if we decide to table this referendum, what will happen, and then we can have a discussion of is this what the board wants to do or not. So if we decide to go for the November 30th, referendum, we have August 28th as a filing deadline. If we decide not to go, and the main reason for that being that we don't have a superintendent, would be the next March we would be in the same position, so no, that would not work either next March or April because we wouldn't be with a superintendent. So we wouldn't go in March, April 2019. November 2019 again would be the same thing because we would have just hired a new superintendent who would officially probably start in July. So with the filing deadline being in August, you would have about a month, month and a half for the new superintendent to come on board. And a whole lot of work would have to be done because it would have been a year since we would have visited this thing if we decide to table it. So that wouldn't go. So that makes us go all the way into March 2020 or April 2020 as the earliest, which puts us about 2 years away. And that adds about 10% to the cost, because the costs are not going to stay steady just because we decide to table it. So those are just the facts, just based on the fact that the reason was because we don't have a superintendent to lead it, you shouldn't do it. One of the other things that we had heard during the thing was it should be the board's lead, and that is what we have been doing. This has been a board's lead, this has been board-led, this has been most of us the board engaging. So based on that, now I'd like to see what our discussion is, and based on that, that's where we're going to take it. Julie.
I think an option possibly that we could consider, and I don't know that I've ever been a super fan of the kindergarten center, but going out for an extremely small referendum in the number of
we are not discussing that. It's a referendum, yes or no. How much, how small, how big is going to be part of the plan. That can come later. It's either we go out or we don't. Because whatever, even if we go out for a small or a big portion of it, that will be part of a plan. It won't be a standalone section. So we would have to decide. Then we would still have to do the work. The question is, do we put the work on hold?
Talking about if we have different options beforehand, I mean, if we're saying just no, we're not exploring those options. So I'm a little confused.
It's a question of, do we go out for a referendum? The amount, the plan, the small part of it will all be part of it. If we decide not to do anything, then that just stops right now.
Well, I'm going to pass. I'm still thinking.
Okay. Jason?
think we need to have a little discussion first as to what our options are if we don't. So if we don't go to a referendum in November, what does that do in terms of solving our space needs? Are we going to go forward with the kindergarten building? What are we going to do about South? What are we going to do about Middle North in the next year? So we already know right now they have space issues. So if we don't do anything in November, what will we do? So I think having that discussion will better allow us to decide whether or not we should or should not go to a referendum in November.
Okay.
So again, I think with Julie, I'm not ready to say yes or no right this second until we kind of have that discussion.
Okay, so what part of it would guide that? Having all this discussion and all the work right now to lead towards that, do the work, or just see what, if we don't do it, like I said, if we don't do it now, the next date is March or April 2020 as the first. If we don't do anything, it would be, our space needs would stay our space needs. I don't think anything can be done in that respect, right? Because we are not going to put a part of a referendum on it.
Right, but kind of I feel like we're talking about is, are we choosing one of the two options we have, and is there a third option for referendum? So, I mean, if you're basing it on the two options we have, my answer might be one thing, but if there's a third option out there, it might be different.
There is no third. We narrowed it down. See, we can't.
Right, but I have a different suggestion.
Okay.
And so the suggestion would be possibly going out for something maybe like the 2.1, or if we decide we only want to put 10 million into the kindergarten center, going out for 4.1, which is a pretty small figure that may be extremely digestible to the community and might pass easily, and it'll at least solve some of our space issues for right now. And it doesn't help us necessarily right now in the middle school, and we can go on later how we want to deal with that, but it'll solve some of the problems in the elementaries.
So that means you are going for a referendum, because if we go with the elementary or kindergarten, it is still part of the plan because you've moved one big piece in that direction.
Right, but but that's not something we've talked about before, not on the table, so maybe we should talk about that really quick if that's an option or not.
But that is a part of the plan. See, the plan, once we have a plan, how we break that plan up or in parts
right, but
would be the...
you just said there were only two plans, so this is a different plan.
No, this is a part of the plan. This is a plan. I mean, I see it as a part of the plan. The whole EFMP is a whole plan.
Well, I see it differently, so I'm confused.
Are you suggesting that we go for a small referendum or proposing that as an option so that we would go forward with the kindergarten building?
As a possibility.
So if we do that, that takes away one of the options, because one of the options does not have the kindergarten building.
Well, right, but if we're going to, that might be a sacrifice we make instead of waiting till 2020 or going right now when it doesn't seem likely to pass in some people's eyes.
Robin?
So the beauty of the Open Meetings Act is I didn't get to hear any of that until just now, and I didn't have time to think about it. So I would need to digest that because I think it makes sense to consider that. Based upon the first question you asked, I know there was some community perception that this was something that Nick was pushing, but since that perception is a misperception, I'm still inclined to go through with attempting, if we can get it to a plan that we think is reasonable to solve our problem and will be reasonably acceptable to the community, I would still say go ahead with at least some of it. At least, if we can pass it, we can start a phase, and then by the time the next phase hits, we'll have a superintendent. Because I think we have some immediate space issues that really can't wait until something passes in 2020, which means really by the time it opens, it's probably 2022. I think that's kind of a long way to wait, given our current needs.
Wes?
We have to do something. We can't just stop doing this and let it come to a halt and wait. Because if we do that, everything we do is going to be more expensive and it's going to cost more money. Like Robin said, we have some immediate space needs. And these are needs that probably needed to be addressed 5 years ago. And because we have, our students have some really cramped spaces. We've got a lot of kids, too many in a classroom. Middle North desperately needs more gym space. It's really unfair to ask kids to eat in a cafeteria where on the other side, kids are having physical education. That's just not okay. I want to do something that has community support behind it, because that is really important, but we have to do something. So I am in favor of moving forward with the referendum, with some type of a plan.
Some type of plan. Matt?
Like Wes, I'm in support of moving forward with something. I would actually prefer to go through these two options so everyone here can see them. I think we've got two.
No, that we are going to,
I
but
know. I'm just saying, I think we're kind of putting the cart before the horse, talking about a referendum before we've even looked at the two options. I think we need to.
no, but the
we
thing
did
was,
all this work to come up with these two plans and narrow it down. I think we need to vet them through right now, and then, like Julie said, maybe slice and dice if we had to. But I think that's the better option, is just present them. We actually have a pretty good crowd here tonight, so.
Considering the
I think
weather
we need
especially.
to show them what DLR has come up with.
I think what Sonali's trying to ask us is, with the knowledge now that Nick is no longer going to be here and we're going to have an interim superintendent, does that change our plan as a board moving forward from now until November?
I would say no.
That's the only
because-
question,
Right,
really.
yeah.
that is the question. It's like, if not, then we are paying them by the hour. And there's a lot of work that goes in for them and for us to keep going. So if we don't want to do this because somebody Nick leading it is not there, or the superintendent leading it is not there, if that is what the board as a collective force decides that this is what we don't want to do, then this has to stop. We can't keep doing the work and not, because if we move forward, we have to move forward with full force, paying them, doing all the work, and that is what we need to do. How we get it, whether we do part of it, small of it, that is still narrowing down the plans and planning it, but that means the work goes ahead. We can come to a final decision, we have time to come to it, but otherwise keep doing the work if we don't want to put a question out, or if we don't want to do it right now, then there's no point in doing all the work for it. Right. So that's the question. But looks like all of us are in agreement that we will go ahead and we'll come to the best answer or the best solution that we can, financially and space needs-wise and constraints-wise.
With at least something, and I think it's worth mentioning, I say this without having met any of the interim candidates, but I do think, given the fact that interim superintendents become interims after an entire career in education, and a lot of them having served many years as a permanent superintendent in various districts, I do think there's a reasonable likelihood we will be able to find somebody, if we want to make it one of the criteria, who's been through a referendum before. We may just, by happenstance, find somebody who's been through a referendum before. So I don't think it's this all or nothing possibility right now where, oh my God, we might have to go through this all alone. I don't think we're going to have to go through it all alone. I think we'll have somebody.
No, we are 7 of us, and we have our administrators, and we have our experts, and we have our teachers, and we have
I know, I'm just saying, I think.
And we have our community.
I just don't want people to get scared, oh my God, they're going to attempt to do this while there's somebody temporary. Temporary doesn't mean that they don't have our district's best interests at heart. So I would say, take a deep breath. I think it's going to be okay.
That's for the community.
I just want to say this, is that the feedback that I've gotten from the community isn't necessarily that they're scared of doing something with an interim superintendent, but just that we have so much on our plate that we may not end up doing anything well. That was kind of the fear. So that was what I'm...
They shouldn't judge us. We can handle it. Okay. We'll do it.
I feel confident that we can, but I agree that the PR side of that perception needs to be addressed. I mean,
Right, because I mean, we can know that all we want, but we're only 7 votes at the ballot box, so.
No, but, you know, we are doing the work and they can see the work and they can see what all the effort that we are putting. And we are, like I said, we are not in it alone. We have our experts, we have our finance experts, we have our administrators who are there to help us all through the way. It's not a one person or a 7 people show either. So, you know, we are doing the work and they should, you know, they should believe in that and just not think what they think and then say that, you know, like we are proving that we are doing the work.
Yes, and it is true, we do have a lot on our plate. You know, for me personally, when I have a lot on my plate, I try to prioritize, and this, addressing our space issues, needs to be our #1 priority right now. So I think, you know, we will have our priorities in
we
order.
have a lot of #1 priorities.
Well, yes.
It'll be
Since we
okay.
are in consensus to move forward,
Yes.
does anybody from the public wishes to comment on that before I turn it over to our architects to go through the 2 options, and then we'll start the discussion on the options, since we have decided that we're going to go ahead with this thing. Anybody from the community wishes to comment? Going once, twice, gone. Jason. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're here to prepare, or present rather, the comparison between 2 options. Just a mere 9 days ago, we met in another community forum, and the board tasked both our company, DLR Group, and LAMP Inc. with this comparison. So this is the next level of iteration, so you'll see a lot of refinement from the last versions if you were here or had a chance to learn about them. And there's more still to come, right? There's still variability in these plans. There are still choices for the board to make in order to arrive at any conclusion before anything could be executed. A few qualifications to the comparison. So at our last meeting, again on the 21st, there was some conversation about separating out EC pre-K from the options rather than including it. In 2016, it was included as a part of both original option A and original option B, and now we are excluding it from the comparison this evening. It doesn't mean it isn't still a choice for the district to make. It certainly is. The community survey is a tool that was executed a few weeks back. We had 770 responses to that. It did not indicate a definitive support for library renovations. However, it did indicate some strong support for STEM or STEAM spaces. You're already doing STEM in your classrooms today. This would allow some dedicated space specifically for those project-based needs. So for tonight's comparison, EC pre-K moving back to the district and the library modernization are not included in the cost that you'll see, but that again doesn't mean that they couldn't be added back in should the board choose. So just to orient the audience and the board to the conversation, we're going to go building by building. You'll see on the left half a comparison of one option and graphically portraying the additions and renovations. On the right half, you'll see the other option. So you'll see them side by side, and there'll be some key notes at the bottom of the slide. It's not an exhaustive list. You'll see some annotations on the graphics themselves, and then subsequent to that visual comparison, you'll see side by side of the costs associated with that. So Tom from LAMP will help us out with the cost side, and we'll talk about the building, the addition and renovation side. So our first building to compare is Elementary North. Now we're going to talk about, at least in one of these options, some building shifts and how the population might move from one building to another building to better accommodate that enrollment, the specific needs of that cohort. So you'll see us talk about buildings as they currently sit today, but please note that some of the populations are shifting, and we've made that annotation on the slides, and we'll point it out as we go. So our first comparison graphically, you can see the left half is the adaptive reuse for Elementary South, which is what we've nicknamed the one option, and then the updated adopted EFMP from 2016 sits on the right half. Just if you squint and take a look at the screen, you can see the things in blue are being added. The things that are kind of hatched in a gray tone are renovated, and the things that exist in white are existing. Okay? So for the adaptive reuse side, we have the Elementary North as a K-5 building, STEM, Encore, and PE additions, as well as some classroom additions, and you can see those annotated. On the adopted EFMP side, you can see the additions are slightly different. We still have some core components, but the kindergarten is shifted to the addition at the Sullivan Center rather than remaining on this campus. So you can see at the bottom, in the lower right-hand corner of each graphic, you can see we've tried to tabulate just the added square footage to each building to give you a relative measure of how they differ. So that's a quantity of blue spaces, essentially. So for the adaptive reuse option, that's 15,000 square feet, and then for the adopted EFMP, it's just over 9,000 square feet.
So just a quick breakdown on what the costs are. You'll kind of see the adaptive reuse on the left and the updated EFMP on the right-hand side. And all these slides are, with the costs, are generally the same layout for each of the school. We have, the health, life safety code items section for building additions, and you can kind of read down the list of various additions that are required for each option. The number in the middle column is the square footage of those additions. And then moving down to the building renovations list, again, with the square footage that we are anticipating to renovate. And we've assigned cost to each of those square footages, which basically just tally up to the total of about $6.9 million for the adaptive reuse option. And then on the updated EFMP is about $4.2 million.
We'll have a direct comparison of all the buildings in a list at the end of the presentation, which will hopefully bring that into focus. But for now, let's stay at the individual building level and transition over to Middle School North, similar format. So in the adaptive reuse version, we have our first switch of population. So in this case, the Townline students would switch buildings with the current Middle School North. We would gut renovate the classroom area of the building to accommodate that transition, including some renovated space for STEM. On the adopted EFMP side, you can see it's quite different, with much of the additions happening on campus to maintain the Middle North 6-8 population as it sits. So you can see some additions for PE and music and student support space, as well as some special education space inside of the 7 classrooms being added. So you can see how those blue spaces work their way around the perimeter of the building, and there's some parking lot changes, what would be on the west side of the building, to accommodate the full gym being added. Some fine arts just to the south of that, and then the classrooms kind of going counterclockwise around the perimeter. So from just a tally of the blue spaces, we have no additions planned for the adaptive reuse version, and we have roughly 20,000 square feet planned for the adopted EFMP. Similar format, the totals are at the bottom. So on the adaptive reuse side, because we are renovating as much of the existing facility to convert it for Townline's purposes, you can see that still carries a $6 million price tag. On the adopted EFMP side, with the additional square footage being added, you can see that that's more expensive at $9.8 million. Townline Elementary. So again, for the adaptive reuse version, we have the switch of the 2 populations. So the Middle School North students would transition to Townline, while the Townline students would transition to the current Middle North building. We'll talk about dual language in just a bit. So you can see that we're renovating Townline for the Middle North students. So that includes adding lab spaces and things like that, industrial arts, various encore programs. So you see STEM as well, chorus, and some classroom additions to accommodate that. Very similarly, on the adopted EFMP side, you can see that It's the Townline 1.5 dual language K-5. So again, kindergarten goes to the Sullivan Center addition. You can see that in the second bullet, and then likewise the STEM art and classrooms being added. So from a quantitative perspective, the blue boxes are about the same size, 9,700 square feet to 9,750 square feet between the two options. So Townline remains pretty balanced between the two choices. From a cost perspective, there is a significant difference in the cost. So you can see the 7.7 on the left side for adaptive reuse and the 4.4 on the right side for the adopted EFMP. Tom, you want to talk about that? The difference being the renovations, too.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see that there's a significance in the building renovations is pretty much where the biggest costs are coming from. You got about 12,000 square foot of renovation going on at the adaptive reuse at Townline versus basically just about 1,000 square feet at the student support room for the updated EFMP.
Can I ask a question, though?
Sure.
But if I'm looking at the cost of doing the Townline Middle North swap, once you add in both of the swaps, it's really the same price under either option. Am I reading that right? It's basically like 13 million to swap those buildings, but it's 13 million total if we do the adopted EFMP?
We could do some quick math on that, but that sounds logical.
So from a cost standpoint, it's kind of a wash. It's really just what parts do we like about. So how do you think it would affect it if we did something like the adopted EFMP, but still swapped Townline into Middle North, but now Townline moving into Middle North wouldn't need the kindergarten classrooms? How do you think that would affect the cost of swapping those two buildings?
That'd be something we could run for you.
I think we had tried that and it doesn't hold because you need to remove those 450 kids out of a dual language. If you just do the adopted, then your dual language kids are still in Townline. So when they move to Middle North, they will move, all 450 of them will go into that space, and you will need more additions onto Middle North to take in Townline. Because in adopted EFMP, the dual language kids stay at Townline building itself. Right now, when you do the elementary south and you're doing the building shift, your 450 have moved out of that space.
Oh, okay.
So that space will not hold that many kids. Middle North does not hold the whole Townline population. It only holds the population for 2026 minus the 450 of dual language.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay. Gotcha. Thanks.
Let's review the Middle South. So these are exactly the same. Left and right side of the screen, tabulation of blue area, renovated area, exactly the same. So you'll see that in the costs. They're exactly the same. $7.44 million is the estimate for those two. Aspen, there's a shift there. So the dual language K-5, to Sonali's point, shifts from Townline in the adaptive reuse elementary south version to the current Aspen building. So again, you kind of have to keep the puzzle pieces in mind here. And then in the other facility, the big difference in the adopted EFMP is the current Aspen stays at the current Aspen. So the net building changes aren't that dramatic between the two. We see rough similarities. You have a little bit more square footage being added in one versus another, but you have more renovation in the other. So things generally balance out. Now, from a cost perspective, some of those renovations are changing the cost metrics. So you can see on the adaptive reuse side, we're at $682, but because of the addition of STEM at 2,000 square feet at a higher dollar per square foot number, you're going to see a higher value at 1.3. Next is elementary south. So again, left side of the screen, the adaptive reuse of Elementary South. This would be the Aspen students moving to the old Elementary South. Just glimpsing between the two, again, you can see a difference in the number of additions being added to the school. So, just from a square footage perspective, 13,300 versus 20,000 or just over. Some of the core elements remain true. Now, in the adopted EFMP version, where Elementary South stays at its current building, we've created that loop corridor for circulation, with the additions on what would be the west side of the building, although it's rotated on screen, but would be the west side of the building, would complete that circulation loop. Whereas on the Aspen version and the elementary adaptive reuse version, you can see that we're still widening the hallway and creating greater circulation, but we're not indeed connecting that west edge. So from a cost perspective, the adaptive reuse version where Aspen moves in, 7.2 million, and then the adopted EFMP where Elementary South stays at Elementary South would be 10.1. Okay, so next we'll talk about adaptive reuse. As we did in 2016, we had an opportunity to do a test fit analysis of the square footage. So as a part of the natural iteration and refinement of any design process, we start with a program, and that program is a tabular listing of spaces with an idealized size. On top of that, we apply a grossing factor. That allows for things like mechanical rooms, toilets, janitor's closets, hallways, wall thicknesses, circulation, stairs, elevators, all the things that are outside of the net space. When we do a fit analysis, it gives us an opportunity to test that grossing factor in a given shape on a given site with a given set of circumstances, because they're all different. And indeed, the same program on two different sites might yield two different designs and two different sizes, just depending upon the parameters and circumstances of those two sites. So we wanted to validate, because if you had a chance to attend last week or saw the presentation online, you would note that we have programmed about 145,000 square feet for a new Elementary South, new construction, okay? When we put it into a theoretical adaptive reuse, now I say theoretical because the district hasn't selected a particular site, we're just utilizing the same one we did in 2016. We could fit that student body in about 115,000 square feet. So it's much more efficient in this circumstance than it would be perhaps in another circumstance. So we've taken that to the advantage in this case from a cost perspective. So you'll see that at the top left of both floors, first floor on the left, second floor on the right, you'll see some white space. That's just telling us that the adaptive reuse that we selected wasn't necessarily needed to be as big as it was, right? So you could find a different building that was a little bit smaller, maybe the same proportions, and we would yield a similar result. You could repurpose that space. If the district bought a building like this, you could repurpose that space for other district use. It could be storage, it could be, lots of different things at any given time in the future, again, if the district owned the whole building. An important caveat to what you see kind of outside of the footprint in the lower right of both floors, you'll see something called PE2 stations, and then in parentheses at the bottom, you'll see something called shelter. So as a part of the building code for schools now, we have to put in storm shelters that are capable of resisting 250-mile-an-hour winds and something being projected at a building at that velocity. So we have to provide that for all occupants in the building. And so you'll see that being added on as it was the most cost-effective way to facilitate that outside of the building, given the structural requirements of that, rather than relying on gutting the inside of that building to make that use happen. So you'll see a little bit of an addition there. I should talk about it. So there's two floors. Left is first floor, right is second floor. They stack. It would be an atrium between the two. You want to get, in fact, by code, we have to allow natural light to get to the first floor. So we look at different ways to do that through solar tubes, which are basically tubular skylights that can be directed to any floor. We'll look at the atrium as a way to get light down into the first floor, things like that. to help with the configuration, but you can see how the classrooms would generally fit together and how those spaces might work. I don't know if, can you all see my cursor when I do that? Yeah. So you can see this would be an opening to the first floor, and then again, some other openings to the first floor, allowing some visual access to both floors. Okay, so from a cost perspective, Tom, do you want to talk about this one specifically?
So basically, we tried to take the floor plan that DLR created and try to do as much of a detailed takeoff as we could, just based on a couple sheets. We tried to make as many assumptions as possible. And you can see up on the screen, it's kind of a similar format to what you've probably seen for the other cost estimates that we've done. The top line kind of being the overall construction costs. Right now, you can see we're carrying some heavy contingencies just because there's a lot of unknowns. You know, we haven't even had a chance to go inside this building. We've just kind of looked at it from an aerial view on Google Earth and tried to make our best assumptions and try to add in general conditions, construction manager's fees, performance bonds, architect engineer's fees, and all the things that would go into the project, and try to even throw in a line for purchasing the building of about $3 million. You'll see down there at the end. A complete guess kind of at this time, estimated guess, and with a total about $36.7 million for an adaptive reuse option.
So from a new construction perspective, the dollar per square foot of an adaptive reuse is less than the dollar per square foot of a new construction building. And so there would be a significant savings to the bottom line, the overall cost of the option, by selecting adaptive reuse. So we've chosen that as a part of tonight's comparison. That doesn't mean that the board couldn't say, no, we'd really like to build a brick and mortar structure somewhere on a piece of land, and of course we could adjust the cost there.
Does that price include a playground? And if so, is that still planned for something with a rooftop? As it was a couple years ago, I think the adaptive reuse was planned for a rooftop playground. I mean, those are expensive, so I just want to know if this price includes.
We have costs in there for a playground.
You
Yes.
do? Okay.
But on the ground.
Yeah.
On the ground, okay.
On the ground.
That's even better, I think.
So the other big difference between the two plans is the kindergarten at the Sullivan Center. So by now we're all familiar with what this looks like, and so this is based on what was bid. So you can see the addition in blue in the existing Sullivan Center in white, and the reconfigured driveways and access aisles and bus drop-offs and all that kind of thing depicted in the roadways. And so you can see this was actually a hard bid number as of this spring, 14.1. Now that's prior to the value engineering being a part of the discussion. Okay, so let's talk about the estimated cost together, right? So we've broken it down by individual campus, contrasted the two plans, and showed you a lot of information, but sometimes it's hard to sort of bring that all together on your own. So we've just gone and simply listed them all out with the totals at the bottom. So the adopted EFMP is significantly less expensive than the adaptive reuse elementary south, and you can see how those line items compare from side to side. You'll see that the Sullivan Center and the adaptive reuse option has been lined out because it's not required. And likewise, the adaptive reuse and the adopted EFMP has been lined out because it is indeed not required, but the two lists are equal across.
This last slide here is just to kind of help answer the question that was kind of asked last week or at the last meeting about kind of where the costs are coming from and how they're made up. So we kind of had the four categories: new construction, light renovation, medium renovation, heavy renovation. And you can see on the top line is basically the hard construction costs. It's all the contractor bids. And then it just follows down with the soft costs, which are the general conditions, CM, architect fees, permits, owner costs, different things like that. We had added a line in for contingency. And then the last three lines are a percentage. It's about 5% per year, just kind of a rough number right now on kind of what we're seeing, how construction costs go up per year. So we're trying to, not knowing how any of this will be phased or when it'll go, those sorts of things, we're just trying to plan for some of that escalation in some of these numbers right now. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of breakdown. of kind of where we were coming up with the costs. And it's not an exact science. All these numbers, there's some fluctuation in each of them, depending on the project, what the project entails, those sorts of things, when it's going to happen. But right now, this is kind of our best estimate on, the numbers that we're using with each of the components of all the different schools in both of the options right now.
And with that was our last slide. Happy to open it up for questions, comments.
I don't know if I missed it, but can you explain the drastic difference between the numbers we saw last time and the numbers we're seeing tonight?
Yeah, so with every iteration, we're refining our information. So I mentioned last week how we're utilizing programmatic square footages to do our cost estimates, right? So if you take just the example of the new elementary south versus the adaptive elementary south, the new elementary south was programmed at 145. When we did the fit analysis, it's at 115. The new construction is, as Tom is tabulating with escalation, 421. With the adaptive reuse, that number is much less. It's in the threes. I forget what it is. 350, 360, something like that. So again, as we get further information, we get more information. We did a fit analysis on Townline into Middle North to determine how much renovation we would have to do to fit the elementary classrooms in the current facility. And we did similar exercises where we thought we needed to have additional clarity based on what we were doing. Last week was based on gross numbers. This week has a lot of estimates based on net numbers because we know how the additions are plugging in and what those square footages might entail.
Okay, because it was significant with the original EFMP as well.
Yeah, and the other differences between the original EFMP and the version that we're presenting tonight, again, the original EFMP had the EC pre-K classrooms coming back and also had the library modernizations coming in. So those costs are excluded from our comparison tonight, but still could be a part of the conversation. So obviously those would be additive.
So last meeting's numbers included pre-K
Yes.
coming back, so that
And modernization
required
of libraries.
extra classrooms as well as modernizing the library. These numbers do not, so that accounts for a big chunk of the difference that we're seeing between tonight's number and last meeting's numbers.
Can you
That's a
tell me
portion of it.
sorry, can you tell me approximately, and I know you have them estimated, and I could go and do the math, but library renovations, if we add library renovations in an updated, adopted EFMP, do you know what that number is coming up to approximately?
Just give us 1 second, we'll be
Sure.
able to answer that question.
Well, hold on, because the way I'm looking at these plans, like if you go back to slide 5, which was Hawthorne Elementary North, looks like the library reno is included.
They're
No, it's not
graphically depicted, but they're not costed.
They're not, okay.
It's in the cost in the next slide over, it's in the gray. It's
Yeah, there are, we could do the math this way too, but let's go back to, so you can see right here,
Yeah.
down on the bottom of both, the cost at Aspen would be around $750,000 for the
Gotcha.
libraries, but it's grayed out below the line. So this is slide 18 if you're looking in your packet.
In the meantime, can I ask you a question about the survey result? I thought at the board meeting on May 14th, when you gave us the results of this most recent survey, I remember seeing that there was some prioritization of STEAM or STEM space as a dedicated space. But I thought you also said that there were some results that were not statistically significant. So where does that prioritization fall? Is it was it statistically significant response that we got to that, or was it just something that seemed to be more favored than other options? Because I'm just trying to reconcile it with the survey from the last time we voted, which was we do not like STEM as a dedicated space. So makes me a little nervous to just pick the one we want to hear if it's not really the accurate representation.
When you say dedicated STEM, are you saying separate building?
Separate
or-
space dedicated to it versus we already have STEM curriculum going on in certain spots, but I don't think that that's the same thing as dedicated STEM space.
Because we also had an option where STEM was in its own facility, so to speak.
Oh,
as
yeah,
well.
no, not the standalone,
Okay.
but when we did it last time in 2016, it was, or no, when the vote was in 2017, sorry, it was additions onto each building. And I think the result from that survey was that there was not support for having those additions put on just for STEM. But now this survey is showing that there is support for STEM as a dedicated space. So I just want to make sure we're,
I don't remember that last survey that you were referencing that says STEM was not supported.
It was the one that was done
right,
right
after
after.
your election.
For the community?
Yeah, it was the first community engagement survey we
So
did.
that, my reading of that was it was a toss-up. We had a handful, or a good number of people that supported and a number that did not. So it was, to me, it was inconclusive from that survey whether or not STEM was heavily supported or not. So then this last survey, I think we had a little more fidelity in it in terms of, yes, it was. So the community survey that you're referencing from back in 2017, it was more anecdotal. There was a number of comments saying, yes, great. Number of comments saying, no, don't need it. So at that point, we didn't have the ability to do the analysis in terms of doing the statistical analysis showing was there any significance one way or the other. It was kind of like when you read it, what popped out to you, what stuck in your mind, probably made more of a difference than anything statistically meaningful.
I mean, I do think some of those comments and anecdotes do matter. I mean, I think whether there's a hard number we can attach to it, you know, I think if people are given the opportunity to give their honest feelings about what they didn't like about the plan, I think we got somewhat of an answer. So I just want to be super careful. But back to my question, was that a statistically significant portion or result of this survey?
I'd have to go back to the May 14th presentation to remind myself of the statistical significance. However, there was strong agreement amongst the survey members that STEM was a high value for them.
Okay.
The positive, like high priority to medium priority on STEM or STEAM came up to at 64%, while on an agree or disagree basis, it came up to agree or strongly agree for libraries. It's at about 57% on this thing. There's a higher standard deviation on the libraries versus it's much tighter on the STEM part, if I'm looking at just raw data and basic standard deviations on those numbers and the graphs from the things that we were provided.
Okay.
So one was a priority and one was an agree or a strongly disagree. So I don't know, you know, like STEM was put as a question for priority, while
Right.
libraries were, do you agree or disagree that the libraries need to be modern and flexible?
Oh, yeah,
So,
I mean, I'm not even looking to compare STEM to libraries. I mean,
no, I'm just saying is like in that respect, it's about 64% onto medium or high priority on a STEM basis, and the standard deviation is at about 1. So it's pretty tight on that one.
okay.
So as far as the current survey as of it goes.
Okay.
And I know the last time we also did have kind of a minor confusion as to, because we had changed the plan from a separate facility to renovating classrooms, and that had caused a lot of confusion itself in the understanding of the plans, which was, you know, bad educating on our part, or not enough educating on our part. But this time everybody knew that there wasn't a separate facility. Everything would be a classroom changed in the building itself, just to be able to do it not in the classroom like you go to the library, like you go to the art room. It would just be a STEM room.
So Robin, to your original question, the libraries are totaling right around $5.2 million across the district. The pre-K coming back and the adaptive reuse of Elementary South option is 4.9, and for the EFMP version, it's 4.7 and change.
Okay, thank you. Did Dr. Leali leave? Is she in here?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, darn it, I was gonna ask if there was any very obvious difference in operating expenses that jumped out at her.
I think the operating expenses, from what I remember, from what I have, the last time we had asked our facilities to run it for us, they had run, see, I told you I need this space. I have it. If you give me 1 minute, I can find out what the last number that I got was. I think it was for 100,000 square feet. It was a number that was given to us. Let me see. But that is an old number. So if we run a new, if by square footage, if you do it, so about a 75,000 square foot new building would run at about 122K was estimate. And this estimate is kind of low, and because it's also an older estimate, so I haven't added any inflation to it.
That is super low.
That is super low.
I mean,
but
if
that's
you pay 16 teachers to go into a kindergarten center, that's well
no,
over.
but I'm just talking about just operating cost of running a building, not the staff costing. I was just
I'm
talking
talking about
about,
operating expenses that we're gonna have to pay for going forward. I don't really care what it goes toward. I mean, I care what it goes towards, don't take that out of context. But just
so you were looking about the staffing too? Okay.
everything. I mean,
Okay.
is one option gonna cost us significantly more annually going forward? Because just because it might be cheaper up front doesn't mean it's gonna be cheaper in the long run. I wanna just make sure that we're looking at that, so we're not leaving the next 5 boards with a deficit.
So both options have a new building, so the administrative cost there is probably roughly the same, roughly.
One's a much bigger building, but yeah.
One's twice as big, so you might have an extra administrator there, but in terms of, support staff, all the other staff, number of teachers is gonna be the same, because you're gonna have to teach the same number of kids. So I don't think that's gonna be much of a difference.
I think there will
It's
be
more about-
more support staff and more
So the,
staff at the new elementary south building
It's a
because
bigger
because of the
building.
number of kids. You know, you have 900 kids there versus 450 in a kindergarten.
Right.
You have lesser kids, you will have lesser nurses and lesser support staff in that
Right.
case.
To Jason's point, if those kids are coming to the district, they're coming anyway.
Yep.
So
so you have,
the increased cost
Even
would be
a
that if
little
we're
bit
trying to
more.
keep the classrooms to 25 or less per homeroom.
The teacher cost would be the
versus-
same, but
Versus
then,
if we built no new space, you might end up being forced into bigger classrooms with still one teacher, so.
the total square footage on the adaptive reuse elementary south is larger than the total district-wide for the updated EFMP, is that correct?
if we do
I think
things.
so.
I believe that's correct, yes.
So, you could say, all right, that's gonna cost you a little bit more to run, heating, cooling, electricity-wise. So
Right.
that's gonna be a little bit more on there. How much more? I don't know.
The,
You could do the
the
ratio.
proportion of new to existing square footage has a direct impact on the energy costs. So a new building by energy code is about 50% more efficient than one built in the 1980s. And so square foot per square foot, the energy cost will be lower for new versus existing or renovated.
How would that cost for when it's an adaptive reuse? Because the building has been built, some of the mechanicals will be there, or we're going to gut all the mechanicals and put everything in new?
Great question. So the energy code will require us to insulate or add insulation to the existing walls and roof, and we've accommodated that in our budget discussions, as well as a mechanical system that can supply the air required for a school versus the air required for a retail establishment or a warehouse facility. So there would be mechanical and insulation improvements to the adaptive reuse. So aside from building a new skin, it's as close as you're going to get to new construction. So your real cost savings would be just on a pound-for-pound square footage comparison, as well as the envelope itself. You know, the walls, the roof, the things that make up the things that are already standing versus something that have to be constructed from scratch.
Do you have any adaptive reuses in mind that are approximately 115,000 square feet? Because I believe the ones we saw with you were slightly larger.
That's a great question. So we haven't done an exhaustive property analysis to figure out what's available right now and the pros and cons of each of those.
Sure.
But that could be a good next step if the board wanted to continue to analyze this option.
Because
It just seems like a big variable there. It's gonna,
Yeah.
the risk on the adaptive reuse is gonna be much higher since we don't know, like Robin's saying, is there one available? Can we find one that fits? How much work is it gonna take to do all that? Versus building the kindergarten building, we have a pretty good idea of what's there. The cost on one is gonna be a little bit tighter in terms of variability. The other one, I think, is gonna have a lot more range to it and risk in terms of not knowing. I mean, you build in a big chunk of contingency there, but I think that's where it comes in. But the big chunk, can we even find one for $3 million? That's,
Right.
who knows?
And that's right now it's just a
It
placeholder,
could
so
be,
Right.
3, 5, 1, who knows?
Well, and the transportation costs on an ongoing basis are more likely going to be increased with adaptive reuse because it's less likely we're going to find it anywhere near one of our neighborhoods. So now we'll be transporting kids that right now don't get transportation because they're within a mile and a half. Whereas I can imagine a lot of these warehouses and where they're at, unless we could find one that was within a neighborhood-ish.
The one that we did the test fit for is the one that we toured that day.
Okay.
The larger, longer rectangular one, if you recall. So it's based on a real building. It's not a theoretical building, but, you know, as far as the transportation costs go, that would have to be
But then
analyzed.
everybody who goes there, all 900 students, will receive transportation.
One of the things we have to remember while we can talk is, I'm going to, Dimitri, could you put that debt slide up for me, please? While we are considering these two options, one of the things that is important to consider is I am by no means going to be able to explain Abe's debt limit projections and review, but that this is a slide from last time, so the fifth one, the fifth slide of the, or sixth slide actually, it's the sixth slide. Because, yes, thank you. Because this is one of the slides that's really important because in this, because this kind of tells us how much can we go out for if we go out. And in this case, one of the things we should remember when we go out and as we are trying to work it, after we pass a referendum for whatever amount we do, we have about 5 years to issue the bonds. If we don't issue the bonds, you don't get taxed for it. All projects will be, to some extent, phased unless we go out for only one building and then that one building will get built. If we go out for multiple buildings, all of it, it will be phased. One of the things that I want to kind of also point out that in the adaptive reuse plan, 36 million is our biggest, at the conservative figure of 36, so let's go with that. 36 million is our first piece of puzzle that needs to move. Only after it moves can we move other things and other places to create that space, to create things. Because without moving that big 36 million, the only school that will get relief or can be touched is Elementary North and Middle South. Those are the two schools that are not touched in those building shift. So we have to move that biggest puzzle piece to get relief and start movement, and that is at 36 million. The biggest puzzle piece for movement is the $14.1 million kindergarten center. Once we move that, we can move a lot of other things because they create that moving of $14.1 million gives us immediate space in all our elementaries. Our middle schools are not touched, and we can start touching them at the same time too, while the kids are. That is important to look at when we actually look through that, the charts of the two things side by side of the total comparison that DLR just gave us, because we have to try to meet all of this within this 2023, so it's 26 million. That is about the capacity of the loan that we can take on. That is what we can go out for. So we need to be cognizant of that fact. And we will do this with Abe here next board meeting, because he'll be able to explain all those finances of how we can finance something better to us. But we need to be sure that whatever option we choose, and we start narrowing it out today, meets within our debt limit projections.
You make a lot of good points.
Always.
I like you. So here's a pickle.
And one more thing, out of that 14.1 million, 1 million is spent. So that is 13.1 right now, because 1 million is spent in all the pre-work. Am I correct? Almost.
Just about.
Almost.
Almost.
Sonali, I don't remember how the meeting was exactly set up, but if it's community engagement, now that we have some information out there, do we want to see if we have any more public comment, or was it not set up like that?
No, it is set up like that, but we are still discussing, so we opened it to them, and we'll open it to them again in parts like we did the last time too. So.
It just seemed like maybe a good part, since there's been a lot of info thrown out, so.
Can I just ask one real quick question? Off of, I'm reading my notes from the EF&P from a year ago. Middle South, was it like 3.6 million? Does that sound right originally? And now it's like 7.3. I don't have the original one with me.
I do.
Am I right on that?
Let me get it. I have it somewhere.
Yeah, 3.8.
So I'm trying to figure out where we've added on to that one.
So if you have Wes, do you have the diagram for that you could share with Matt? Because you could compare them side by side and see how the additions differ.
Do we want to have a conversation about how much money we want to put in? Because under both of these plans, it's as if we're using $0 from the reserves, other than the almost 1 million that we've already paid, or already spent, I should say.
I want to have that conversation in front of with Abe, because he'd be more adept in telling us how much we can, how much. And I would have called him if he was not sick. So
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we have that conversation coming up, and that.
yes, we definitely do, because we have, depending on what else is coming down the pipeline for us from the state and what things are coming down, he'd be more able to tell us how much is he more comfortable pulling out from the fund cash reserves or fund balance. Those are two different things.
Sure.
So that's another big piece here, that that money that we've already spent, if we continue with the EFMP one, we get the benefit of that, because
Yes.
that goes into the planning, a lot of the bid stuff, a lot of the architectural work. If we go with the other plan, that is gone, that is sunk. Is that
Yes.
correct? There's not much there that we can you can use from that work. Is that correct?
Well, I think that depends on, if you were to build new construction, we could certainly take the design theory and execution from the kindergarten center and apply it to a new building, right? The drawings just transport to a different site and get added onto that building.
Okay.
So you would receive some benefit from that, but if you do an adaptive reuse, for example, not necessarily.
Starting over from scratch.
Right.
This is the difference between the older than
There's more.
the 7 and then the science rooms. Any other thoughts, Wes?
I'm still processing this. This is.
So, I don't- Robin brought up STEM. I just did a quick calculation. It's about 4.9 million for all the buildings to do STEM on the modified EFMP one. I didn't add it on the other one. So just to put it in kind of context-wise, you know, if that's something that we want to consider, as you know, if we need, it's about $5 million. Just based on the numbers that are in here.
Yeah.
You guys had it itemized out, so I just added them up.
So let me just play devil's advocate for a second, even though I actually don't like doing that.
Robin.
Sorry, I'm used to being so loud, I don't need a microphone. I said, let me just play devil's advocate here with STEM for a second. I will preface this by saying I'm a big fan of STEM. It is by far my middle schooler's favorite part of middle school, so full stop. A lot of the feedback I'm hearing from the community is that they think we can offer that curriculum with what we already have in class, understanding that some of the bigger projects won't be able to be left assembled and intact on an ongoing basis, but that there's still plenty to be offered in our current classroom setting, and that STEM is sort of, to them, a trend, it's a buzzword, it's things that have been taught all along, but now we're calling it something different. So, seeing as how I feel like I'm especially hearing it from an older part of the population, they are big voters. So I think we do, even though they're not as the ones that show up to a lot of these meetings as much, I know they're paying attention. I know they're big voters. I think it's important to consider the fact that they might not see the value in that as a separate space. And, you know, my other concern being, if we go with the adopted EFMP, which is basically really no different than what we went with last time, is this just the definition of insanity? Are we going to do the same thing and expect a different result? Is the difference going to be enough that we engage the community more this time? Is it going to be enough that we offered more education this time? Is it enough that time has passed and maybe people have now seen the value in it, whereas they didn't a couple years ago? I don't know, but I'm definitely nervous to go putting the same plan on, especially for more money, essentially.
Those are two questions. The
I
STEM,
know.
as far as you said, was one of the things was, and I did a quick math. I mean, if we decide to go with a plan, and that's what I'm saying, we have to choose a plan first, and then we can start narrowing it down or taking it some of parts or taking something out or adding something. But just to say, as you were saying, if we decide to do STEM in all schools is about $5 million.
Right.
But if we do STEM only in the middle schools and not do elementary schools, as you say, that's $1 million there. So you can shave it off at 4, but that would be our job if we decide to go with that plan. We are again getting into the nitty-gritty. We need to look at what we can afford and what we can go for to begin with.
That's fine. I just think it's considerations moving forward, and
No, definitely. But so that is the STEM question. As far as your other question, I don't have an answer to that. Like, you know, it is the plan, but we've gone through everything. This is the same. This is the plan that comes up being fiscally responsible. This is the plan that comes up being affordable, not only just fiscally responsible as far as our operation costs and transportation costs and maintaining costs go, but also what we can afford with that debt ceiling on us. So that is the only plan we can fit more into or get more out of. If we go for bigger pieces of puzzles, I don't know if we can afford anything, or if we afford one thing, the rest of it still can't be afforded. So
I hear you, but we cannot afford to fail a referendum. Like, absolutely not. So talk about the sunk costs of $1 million. We fail a referendum, that's gone if we attached the kindergarten center to that. Now we would have to go revisit, do we want to do that again out of cash reserves anyway? But I just think yes, it's more fiscally responsible, totally agree. Yes, it's less expensive, obviously, on its face by a humongous margin. But if it's not going to pass, then that does us no good. So I want to make sure it's the right plan and a plan that is supported by the community, if we can find a way to make it also affordable, because I'm just really going, I think the conversation is going to get really, I don't want to say uncomfortable because I don't mean it like that, but I think the conversation is going to significantly change if this referendum fails. I don't know if we get a third bite at the apple. I don't know if at that point it just comes down to start cutting programming wherever we can to create space.
Okay, here's a couple of things I could look at it that, to answer, and please feel free to jump in. So
Anybody.
Anybody.
I understand Robin's point too. I think a large part of the problem last year, and that was with myself included as part of the community, was education. It got pushed through really fast and there was not a lot of lead time. I think we get it out there and we've got a community that's supportive of it and can get some education pieces out there fast enough and before the school year starts, we're ahead of the ballgame this time rather than.
So, as one of a community member outside on the last referendum, did you feel that it was just you didn't know enough about the plan, or was it the wrong plan? So, to Robin's point, are we doing the same thing if we go with that as a definition of insanity, or is it just that we're doing the same thing, but we're doing it better education, better definition, better community involvement?
Because, Matt, you sat through a lot of the meetings, so what was missing from those meetings when they were explaining everything?
I'd ask you the same
You
question.
Well, I would ask both of you the same thing.
Yeah,
I didn't sit through nearly as many as you did, for sure.
My
but-
problem was that I felt like it got pushed through at the end of January, and you had an April referendum, and there was not enough time to even get any groundswell behind it, let alone educate people. I think it just kind of, it was almost doomed to fail from the get-go, from the timing.
And I agree with you. I think I had pressed to extend it out
did.
because I didn't felt that we had enough time to do the proper education and get the support that we needed. It wasn't that I didn't think that the plan was right. I thought it was more about trying to get it out there and getting the support that we
I
needed.
think if you hammer the community on the benefits of STEAM and STEM now, because even I was kind of baffled by that. I mean, I didn't have kids in the district, so I was kind of confused by the whole thing. But if you start hammering away at that stuff and presenting them with the information, and all the other districts in the area that have that dedicated space, it becomes an easier discussion with some of the older community members that don't grasp that,
I mean, because I can say, a lot of the problems that I had with the plan last year, I still have now. I mean, because it's the same plan with, added congestion to the areas. I mean, we have this all on campus that I think we should start spreading out. And I mean, it's looking like obviously it's unaffordable, but I mean, it's still difficult to accept, I guess, in a way.
Because of the traffic, or is there other stuff?
Well, I mean, traffic and safety and green space, and when we expand our buildings to capacity, then where do we go later? Because this is only a 10-year plan, so what happens after 10 years? We won't have these options of additions to buildings.
On the flip side of that, though, the village doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of space left.
Oh, don't say that.
Well, I mean,
They could start
There
tearing
will-
down all
I'm
these
just
empty
saying,
big boxes
we're-
and putting up condos, you don't know.
I know I said Hawthorne Mall is going to be the next big
Right.
residential
We
subdivision.
can only make decisions on
Stop that.
what we know 10 years out. We can't, I mean, this is a reoccurring problem. I mean, if boards 20 years ago knew this was going to be a problem, you think they would have just built for that? I mean, it's a continual problem, and you're never going to get over it. You just have to.
Yeah, but we're just adding to it. We're not trying to do something different. I mean, or I guess we are, but it's the cost, but it's just still a struggle.
So it seems like I'm having a hard time, and I think the board is having a hard time trying to get our minds around, is this the right plan? Is it a value problem? Is it a cost problem that we're trying to solve as far as what the community wants? I mean, if it's a cost problem, we can start saying, okay, it's the right plan, but it's too high. Now start cutting. If it's the wrong plan, then we have to think about it differently. So I'm struggling trying to figure out where are we with these plans, because once we decide that, then we can know our next step. But we don't even know, is this the right plan? Is it too high? What do we, I don't know what to do next.
Okay.
I'll be honest, I actually thought that the updated EFP, when the prices, when I saw it this afternoon, when we got the presentation, I was actually surprised, to be quite honest. I thought it was going to be closer to the 70 that we had heard last week, so.
Does that cost include the 3 million for the land space across
No.
elementary? That did not,
No.
so that got taken out.
Yeah. So the EC pre-K is taken off, the library renovations are taken off, and the land is taken off from the adopted EFMP plan.
Correct.
Yeah. Matt thinks it's the right plan. I think it's the right plan. It's a plan that gets us,
Can I make a caveat? It's the right plan with proper education and getting the message out.
That's what I was going to say. Is yours on?
hello.
Push your button.
There's always one faulty one. Here you go.
Thank you for sharing.
You could have scooched together.
Okay, now I have to stand up. All right. Last time around, I was on the outside looking in, and I had a lot of questions that went unanswered about the plan. But now that I'm on the inside looking out, I think one of the biggest things that I didn't realize before was our space issues are real. And I think last time there wasn't a lot of education, and I also think there was too much focus on the message of, you know, we're expanding, people are coming in. We need the space now. We need it a long time ago, and we have needs now that, and I think that needs to be part of our message moving forward. You know, yes, we are growing. You know, we have Cuneo, Melody Farms. We still don't know the status of the addition, 45 in Buffalo Grove
We
Road.
got 17 houses out of that.
Right. So, you know, we will need space, but we need this space now.
So, I don't know, I mean, each plan is gonna come with its pros and cons. I
Always.
don't, yeah. You know, I kind of wish
As
there were,
life.
obviously, I wish there was a perfect plan, but that would probably be $200 million.
But if we just had the money, that would
It'd be so
solve.
simple, right?
It would be.
But since I can't write that check, you know, obviously, I think my biggest concern with the adopted EFMP, aside from are we just putting the same plan out expecting a different result, all of the additions at Middle North, I mean, holy smokes. Like, are we gonna even be taking over the sidewalk? Like, how close to the edge of the street is this getting?
Well, and how is the bus traffic going to work?
I don't know, but, I mean, that parking lot is already so undersized, especially for like after-school events and evening events and stuff like that. So taking over that parking lot is concerning. Again, these aren't things we can't live with. Like, we can live with them. I'm sure we can probably work with the police department to allow some parking on the street for after-school events or something like that. I don't know. But, you know, I think personally, when I'm sitting here considering the comments from the last survey, the things I'm still hearing around the community, I'm happy to consider the updated adopted EFMP, but I would say we probably should have a discussion about whether STEM needs to be an addition on all buildings, or should it just be at the middle schools?
Yeah, that's a different, there are a lot of things we are going to discuss into like every single line item on that. I mean, we will go through it line by line on every
I know,
single.
but that would be, to me, a big deciding factor on whether I think the adopted EFMP has changed significantly enough to get it passed through while still making sure that we're not losing something that doesn't make it the right plan anymore. I spoke
You
in a lot
lost
of
me,
double
sorry.
negatives, I'm sorry.
I know what you're talking about.
I used up all of my speaking skills last night, I'm done. No, I'm saying that, but that, I know you're saying like we can go over the line items later, but to me, that would be a big consideration as to whether or not I think we should move forward with the adopted EFMP versus another iteration of something, because I just don't know that putting through the same exact plan without some significant change is the smartest thing to do, as long as we can still hold true to making sure it's the right plan.
Still lost you.
Anybody else? I don't need a translator, but does anybody else have any thoughts? Because I've...
So I guess I go back to Matt, Wes, and Julie, and again, put you guys on the spot here. You know, if you knew back before you were on the board what you know now, would you have supported this? Because you guys were all on the record saying you did not support it. So, and Matt, you said it's because you did not know enough about it. So to address Robin's concern of, is it really just putting out the same thing, or now that you know more, now that you're more aware of our space concerns, now that you understand what we have, does that change your thinking in terms of, you know, is the plan the right thing or not? And I guess we could ask the community that too, but you guys have the insight of knowing more.
Yeah, and I would say that because I didn't, and I went to every single one of Nick's little coffee talk meetings and stuff, and every time I'd walk away with another set of questions, and then he graciously would answer them the next time I saw him, but I still never felt like I was comfortable with that plan from being on the outside. Now that I've been in the facilities, and that's the other caveat too, is I was never in the facilities, so I didn't understand the problem as well as I do now when you walk through a lot of these schools, that I do grasp the space problems. And I just lost my train of thought. But it was more of an educational part of it. I never thought the money was all that bad. But again, there's the other part of it was a lot of people thought it was wants versus needs and needs versus wants type of thing too, where we also have to hammer that out, where these aren't just things we're desiring, they are things we need. And then I had one other point, and I'll probably forget what it was. I know a lot of people struggle with the kindergarten center as a community, but right now it's really the most physically responsible thing to do. We've worked really, really hard with the Park District and the Village to get this thing hammered out, and it's been a great, community builder between the three entities. I do struggle. I hear their voices with the transition and stuff, so I struggle with that. I feel like it's the best thing to do with the money. That's the part where I know a lot of people are.
Robin's concern, I do agree with a bit of it in terms of if we put out the same thing, how are we going to flip the people? How are we going to convince the ones that voted no to vote yes for it? So if we can't even convince you, how are we going to convince the rest of the public? If we
We convinced him.
I'm convinced now.
Well, that's just it. So what I'm getting to is it is possible through more education, more community support as a whole, to support that plan, even though it may be very similar to the one we put away.
It has to be united front. We can't have people going in 12 different
directions.
directions.
Just trying to use you guys as a test case that if we can't even convince you three, then it's going to be really hard to convince the rest of the public who have much less insight and intimate knowledge of all this.
Hit it.
Just let it go.
This is like this. I don't like leaning forward. Last time, one of the reasons I didn't support the referendum was because I wasn't convinced that it solved the space issues, and I was afraid that if it did pass, the district would have to come back to the community again. So then the $42 million plan would end up costing $70, $80 million when if Plan A had been chosen, and that would have been a $60 million solution. So I looked at it as sometimes the less expensive option isn't necessarily the cheapest in the long run. But now, knowing what I know now, touring all of our buildings, I do feel that this solution will work for our needs. Again, it's, I think from a cost standpoint, we still have some things that, we can chip away. Like, I would like to see cost difference, like Robin said, about, STEAM at middle school versus STEAM at, all the buildings. But I think overall, I am convinced that this plan will solve our space issues.
So that's 2 votes that we.
2 out of 3.
No, 2 out of, I don't know, 500 that we need to convince.
No, but the important is here
I'm trying to
because
see that small steps here.
it's one step at a time.
Yeah.
So, Robin, were you saying something? No.
So then you two now are probably our best supporters and our best,
Absolutely. I mean, that's,
voice to go out there and say, you know what, I was against this pretty much plan for these reasons, and now after learning more, I'm for it. So
and I'll tell you,
that voice will
it's
be
hard to
very
eat crow
powerful.
when you're,
Yeah.
I mean, when you get on the other side and you go, oh, geez,
And providing that voice will be very powerful
Right.
to the community to see someone skeptical, not convinced, finding everything about it, and now saying, yes, this is something that I can support. So I think that's going to be very helpful if we go with that plan.
So now here's my next question, though. Is it then even riskier, knowing that there's some community opposition to the kindergarten center, to go adding the kindergarten center to the failed referendum plan and then expecting it to pass? Like,
But that is your biggest piece of the puzzle. If you don't do that, that plan is no plan. I mean, that plan is based on that one biggest piece.
I absolutely understand that. I'm just saying, that was not part of the referendum last time that it failed. So if we are now adding a part that we know doesn't have a ton of community support, are we really asking for failure, or is it going to be an even bigger effort to turn around those votes? Because
But
now
is it, or maybe is it that the people who are against it just louder than the ones who are supporting it right now, and that's why all we are.
I feel like we have a very vocal support system right now.
No, but in that, that's why I'm kind of torn about that. But
Well, I think what Ron was saying, even the people who are supporting a referendum fully still had reservations of the kindergarten center.
okay,
Somewhat, but I just think, we have a very vocal support system right now, and I'm really appreciative of that. I understand people's reservations about all of it, but again, I don't think there's a perfect plan, but I'm just saying, is that going to be like a Herculean effort, is to now add this piece to the puzzle that we know, there's some opposition against, and now we'd only have to turn around people on a plan they didn't support the first time and hope they support it the second, but now add a piece that we already know they don't support.
I think it
That's
was.
not a given either.
It's not a given. We could still pull it out of the referendum,
Try to pull it out and try to find a way to either value engineer it down to what we need to, talk to the village to try to help us, get to what we can afford with our 12 million.
But it is an integral part of the plan.
So we have some options there of not having it part of the referendum.
But overall,
It's
looks
gonna be
like that
hard.
is the, sorry,
It's going to be hard to
Yep.
try to
everything is going to be hard.
breach that extra 2 million.
But I'd like to open it to the community, as if anybody from the community wishes to comment, the microphone is there, so if you could please come there and there's
Sign
a
in.
clipboard to
Yeah.
state the name, huh?
I was just reminding them to sign in. I didn't know if you were gonna.
Not Tim.
Yeah, everybody has to
I-
sign in.
No.
Who you are.
I,
What I want to hear at the moment right now is some clarity, some vision of what you're actually trying to accomplish, where we're at. I'm confused. I've watched all the meetings online. I'm attending this one. This was the last one, from what I understood. Where are you right now? Where's the kindergarten plan? I don't see clarity. I don't see a chance we're going to pass it if you don't have a
I take it?
So where we are right now is we had started the kindergarten project with a budget of 12 million. The bids came back at 14. That's above where we were comfortable using our reserves. So because of that, we had to put a pause on that to try to figure out, is that something we want to move forward with? As part of that, we're trying to come back in terms of what plan do we want to present going forward. So that's why we're here. We narrowed it down last meeting to 6 plans, down to 2. We got into more details on the 2 plans. So now we're trying to decide, all right, is one of those plans the right plan or not? Or is it the right amount? Is it solving our problem? So that's where we are. We're trying to get from you guys, the public, where should we go?
Because the last time when we put the referendum, it failed because there was no support. And they, as Matt pointed out, there was less education. They didn't feel they were involved in it. So we went with 6 plans. We did the surveys, we got the plans, we got the feedback, and as you know, all that takes time. So we got that, we narrowed it down, we got to the 2 best ones. Now we're going down to the one that we can. As it is, everything is, and we are trying to do it within our debt limits, within our stop. So we are right now here to get it narrowed down to a plan, run the finances, and try to put it on the referendum for August 28th, which is the deadline for a November referendum. Because if we don't do that, we could put some portables, but we will be crunched for space. We do not have space to put our kids in it because we right now are crunched for space.
So where we stand right now is we have to do something. We have to do something to fix our space issues. What that something is what we're discussing right now. How much are we going to do, how much it's going to cost us, and how we're going to get there. So that's where we're at.
Sorry, can't hear
Do we
you.
have a microphone that works?
He just changed it. Yeah, it's on now.
Okay. My quick question is, if we didn't do the Sullivan Center, which I know personally from what I hear in the community and like at our preschools, people seem to be against, at least more loudly than those in favor of it, can we build more classrooms onto each of the schools cheaper or more effectively than building a whole new center? Have we priced that out? Have we looked at that? Why would that work or not work? It just seems like if the community, we already had it fail once. If we're adding something that a big chunk of the community doesn't like, it seems, from what I've heard, I just feel like it's going to fail again. But if we could build those classrooms on to the schools as they are now, A, is that possible? B, would the community support that, and what would the cost be?
So I believe we've looked at a lot of those options, and the core team vetted a lot of those types of options. Not only are several of our buildings landlocked, so there's, on some of them, just not a ton of space to add as many classrooms as would be required. But every time you add classrooms, not only are you going over what the recommendation would be for best practices of a population in a certain aged building, but you then have to increase cafeteria space, gym space, these high-volume spaces that are really expensive to increase. So it's really not just a matter of the actual classrooms is the problem. Makes sense.
And then, are we still looking to build, I didn't see this in any of the plans, and I've missed a few of the meetings, but are we still looking to build possibly a whole new building on that open space across from Elementary South?
No.
Not under these plans.
Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi, my name's Alyssa. I'll sign in. The one thing I remember from the last time this went to referendum was certainly hearing the needs for education, and there was a pamphlet or a single sheet of paper put out with just a ton of information, and I read it word for word. I went to all the meetings and went to all the same stuff, saw you guys all the time, but I do know a lot of people had a hard time understanding. There was a number out there at that time, because it made sense with the numbers at that time, that for about every $100,000 value of your home, it'll be about $100 per year in your taxes. Certainly the numbers will be different now, but I wonder if, when Sonali, you were asking about looking through this slide more with Abe present or when he
No,
was
this is for
available?
us because this is our debt limit, and that was going to come till he got sick, and But the next meeting we will have that for the referendum as well as questions, and we'll have more of the finances. We didn't think we needed to push this meeting out just because he wasn't there, because this was the decision we could make
Right.
without him being present.
But as these final things get vetted out and you go through it line by line, I think making that abundantly clear, Plan 1 versus Plan 2, the adaptive reuse compared to the updated adopted EFMP, is that the correct title now?
We have to
Looking
come
at
up with a
those
better
two-
name for
Yes, yes, I mean, the blue plan and the red plan. If we look at those about how much is that gonna cost per $100,000 of your home, I think that's a fair thing to line those two up. What does this really cost our residents? And then we need to blast that information everywhere. Because I work and live near a wide variety of people that had no idea, because that publication was so dense last time where I found that information, that I feel like people thought they didn't know, or this wasn't given to them, and then they were surprised later, like, well, how'd you know? Where'd you get that number? Well, I remember reading it, but it was just so dense. If we separate those things, that's really what people want to know. We make it really easy for them to find that information. I think that will really help voters feel like they are understanding and they're informed, and this isn't some shady deal put together because people now seem to understand it's necessary. So I really feel like that information needs to be so clear and so easy to find, not in a dense document. And additionally, the other chunk of voters we need to get to are the people with young kids that are not yet in school. There's a lot of families with lots of little kids, and they're not yet enrolled, and they're hearing about this at their child care centers, or just because people keep talking about it, but they may not understand. So just like our empty nesters have questions, our families with young children that are not yet at school have questions and may not have realized the enormity of this issue last time that went on the ballot. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Hi, I know I just got here, but I was watching online, so I heard some of your discussion, and I just want to state my opinion that I think if we go forward with, if you decide to go forward with the same plan, I do think there is a good chance of it passing with community support. I think last time, as you have all been discussing, there was, public complaint against the referendum, saying that the numbers about overcrowding were scare tactics, that they were not true numbers, that we didn't have an overcrowding problem. And I feel like this year there's been a lot of work by the community to show that that is not something that was made up, and it's clearly a problem that still continues. Robin, I appreciate what you said, that you were worried about presenting the same thing about STEM, and I know there are very vocal people who are against STEM because of the added cost. However, I just don't think removing $4 or $5 million will get those people who are already so against, raising any taxes to necessarily vote for a different plan. And I again appreciate how the board has allowed the community to come up with some options. I think that was a great strategy, but as you saw, all those options were significantly more expensive than the one that you came up with last year. And I think it would just be a hard sell to say, hey, this is that much of a better plan that it's worth, $30 more million, or however much, the difference would come out to be. So I just want to encourage you not to completely throw out that first plan because it failed. I agree that it's so essential that it gets on the ballot this year, and that, once it's on there and you guys have chosen a plan, I know I've stated this in emails, but there is a group of parents who will support the plan and help get it out there so that, there will be more support. And we really need to get those parents, I think like Alyssa was saying, that do have young kids that are, there's plenty of parents in the district that didn't vote. And I think those are the people that we want to get, not necessarily, it may not be fair to ask empty nesters to vote for this and agree, but, you know, there's plenty of other people that we can reach out to. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily. I have a question about, and I don't know if it's to DLR or if there's another expert that could better speak about it, but from the last meeting, the thing I took away was that there was no way we could afford a new building. There's just no way. At any one point, could we have enough money to do that? And yet, still, that remains in part of the two remaining options, and I don't understand how we can even begin to conceptualize where that money is coming from. So if someone could speak to why a new building is still in the mix, that would help me, because I'm losing confidence in the whole thing. And I'm one who was a huge supporter from the very beginning, and now I'm moving into the other camp of I have no confidence in the leadership, I have no confidence in DLR at all, and so it would help me to understand how a new building is still in here, and maybe it could get some of my confidence back in the whole process.
We had 6 plans last time, and we went through them all at a time. We could have come down to one plan last time because the only plan which did not include a new building was the adopted EFMP. So to do it from 6 to 1, we decided as a group that we would keep one of the plans that would work.
Right, but how is one building still in, like, how will that work? How will we have enough money to do a new building?
This is to show the people that it is not, and that is not a new building, that's an adaptive reuse. That's why if we built
Well,
that.
a new school, I'm sorry, a new school. How will we have that much money?
We won't, and that's what I'm trying to tell you.
Why is it an option?
Because people wanted it as an option. So,
But again, come to the leadership here, come to reality, right? If you want something to pass, we have to stay in reality.
so we are in reality.
How are we going to pay for that?
So let's look at the numbers there. So if we've
So,
got,
yeah, explain it.
so we've got $45 million. We've got 12 that in the reserves that we've already said we could use if we want to stay in category 3. That puts us at 57. That's enough for the modified EFMP. If we look at the 68 million at 75% debt limit plus the 12 million, that's 90 million. 80. That's more than the other plan. So depends on.
EFMP makes sense, but a new building, are you saying that we would have that would basically, all we could do is do the building? Is that what you're saying?
No, the amount that we saw today, the 51 million for the modified plan and the 72 million was all inclusive of all the changes. That was for a new building as well as all the other renovations that were necessary. The new buildings themselves, for one building, was 36 million. The new building for the other one was 14 million. So
the 36 million we would fund right away, and we'd have that money.
no, we'd have to go to referendum to get that.
But we could have it all at once.
Yes. If we're willing to go to the 75% debt limit and drop us down to the category 2. So there's a cost to doing that. There's a cost to.
So are we going to have like a more in-depth about that, or is it really like you guys are going to say, okay, EFMP is the way, and that's how we're going to go forward? Because I still don't understand how we would have the money for a whole new building and then do anything else.
If we go to referendum and get $45 million, we can do one plan. If we go to referendum and get $68 million, we can do the other plan. There's enough money there in aggregate to do everything that they
But it
put
comes
out.
at a cost of dropping
So-
into a financial review and having any reserves and having any resources left to do anything else that might come up. So we have to be cognizant of that fact.
So
It's
we-
also from the plan of the feedback, because when we did say that the adopted EFMP, this was a part of the education, that if you go through it line by line and bottom by bottom, this is where we are, this is our logic, this was the education. So yes, coming through all through that, we are coming back to the same thing that we went through, because that was the fiscally responsible, that was the right plan to go with in the beginning, but that was not what the community was hearing. So we had to go through this whole process again to educate the community that what the core team did and how the decisions were made were valid. and logical and fiscally responsible.
Well, I would just, I guess, urge you guys then to just be even more clear and more decisive and demonstrate your leadership about how you're listening to the cost controls and you're making something happen, because it seems like we just kind of keep going around in circles. And I mean, I don't think I'm I'm not capable of understanding. I mean, I feel like I should be able to understand it, I just can't. But I don't understand how you're even answering the cost questions. You're talking about STEM, you're talking about other things, but cost is the issue here, right? Money is the issue, right? So it's like I feel like we missed the question on what is the best thing for us to do with 30 million, for example. That's the number we think can pass. We're looking at it as in the wide open space, and this is our beautiful fantasy, but it's not reality of what we can afford. So I would just urge you guys to really please be more clear and more decisive in your recommendations and give the talking points to the community of what you're trying to push through, because you're going to lose people who have been in favor and no longer will be, much less get more people on board who weren't.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate your feedback, and I think I speak on behalf of all of us when I say we appreciate your feedback, because, again, it's going to be really important to make sure everybody understands it in a way that they can support it, or at least make an educated decision. As far as being decisive, we could be super lickety-split decisive if it's literally just the 7 of us and our opinions are the only ones that matter. That could have been done 2 years ago. But since there was tons of feedback that that's what everybody thought we did, and they did not like being part of the feedback and the development and the kind of hashing out the details portion of it, we're doing it this way this time. So I apologize that it seems indecisive, but we're really trying to include community input and community feedback. So when you take thousands of people and you try to whittle down all of that feedback into something useful, and then take the opinions of the 7 of us and the expertise of DLR and the administration and the teachers, it can seem like a lot of cooks in one kitchen, but I think we've actually done a fairly decent job of trying to streamline this process while still considering the community feedback. So I do appreciate it, though. I think it's really important that we make sure this is understandable. I understand why, looking at this chart, it's like, holy smokes. I mean, that's sort of the way it hit me, too. So I do think that's going to be an important piece of it. I apologize if we seem like we lack clarity or we're indecisive.
And hearing your feedback actually helps us, because knowing what's not clear to you helps us then set that message and try to understand what do people not quite understand, what's not clear to them. Then that allows us to better frame that message in terms of what do we need to tell them, what do we need to make clear. So we do appreciate those types of feedback.
Thank you.
My name's Mary Jane. First of all, thank you all for everything you're doing for the board. I just had a question about, and I don't know if this is a silly question, but there's been a lot of talk about the expansion within Vernon Hills, all the added housing that's coming in, and we're already overcrowded. I'm very much a supporter of what you guys are trying to do to alleviate that. And I just don't know how this works governmentally, but is the village responsible for helping alleviate some of the costs of this? Because I think getting more community buy-in, I think a lot of people are just objecting because they feel like, oh, we pay so much property tax. This is what I'm hearing. And then, you know, the mayor is adding all this extra housing to an already overcrowded, overburdened tax base here. Does the village give you guys enough money? And if not, is there any recourse for that?
We don't get like direct monies from them as far as schools go. We get our property tax. That's how the state of Illinois works. You know, property taxes fund your local education. But they've been helpful in other ways for getting permits, for getting, approvals, getting other ways. And we are in conversations with them to help us financially with loans or to give us some part of certain things. And they are waiting for us to kind of get a plan in place so they can say that this is the part where they would have helped us. So we are in constant negotiation with them. And the Park District has been super helpful, especially all the way through the kindergarten center to, because people have to realize that 14.1 million is a low number just because of the help of the Park District. We're not building a $3 million gym. We're not building we can use a lot of their access, and that land has been given. So there's a lot of support in that respect, as well as from the village in that respect. As far as direct monies, they haven't given us anything as yet, but we have been in negotiations. They're waiting for us to give them a final plan of what we are doing for them to start making some decisions in that respect.
Okay, thank you. That was just my concern. But again, I support all of this, and I think getting community buy-in, especially from people like you, Matt, because I think just my experience talking to people I know within the community who are opposed to it, they hear me and they just think, oh, well, Mary Jane is just all about throwing money at it because she's a Democrat or whatever, they dismiss it as, whatever. So
that's what I always say about you behind your back.
That darn Democrat. But so I think people who maybe were opposed to it before being more vocal about this is why I've changed my mind about it, I think that might help tremendously in swaying some of those more vocal people who are opposed to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And since you asked a question that I've seen a lot of other people ask, either online or just heard, there is no recourse from the village because there is no legal obligation for them to help us at all. They're allowed to build housing until the cows come home if they want to. So while it would be a nice courtesy to consider the impact of the schools and that sort of thing, no, they don't. They're under no obligation whatsoever.
So we get a one-time impact fee for every new house, but the amount we get is set by the village. They set the rate, they determine how much we get.
And it's a one-time thing, it doesn't apply to...
And it's not nearly enough to cover the cost of a new building.
And we have to split it with District 128.
Okay. All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Hi.
She was waiting.
I know, I spoke to her. I just wanted to clarify something for her, and I think something the board still has to remember. Hawthorne 73 is not Vernon Hills Schools. It's Vernon Hills, Mundelein,
Right.
Libertyville, Mundelein, Indian Creek. It's a separate government body. So anything that impacts the district impacts not just Vernon Hills, but also me and Mundelein, people and other things. Yeah. So that's the other reason you don't get money from the villages, because it's all different villages. It's a separate governmental body. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Stacy Hernandez. I have a comment and a question. I think my comment is, as we talk about all these numbers and charts, one of the things as a community member that I have heard and that I've talked to a lot of people in my subdivision about is they want to know the numbers. They want to know with each of these plans how it impacts them and how it impacts them with their tax bill. So if you go with, the red plan, it would be X amount of dollars a month. If you go with the blue plan, it's very difficult to keep flip-flopping back and forth between all these plans and remember, the one with the STEM addition was, extra $40 a month, but the one without the addition with the kindergarten building was only $38. You can't keep it straight. And what it's really coming down to is, can I afford this as a homeowner? Am I going to be forced to move out of a district because I can't afford it? There's a lot of things we want. If you don't have the money, you don't have the money.
Right.
And you're asking us to help support and pay for it with our money. So for $48 a month, you will get this. For $36 a month, you will get this. We want to know. So that was the comment. The question is, again, that I've talked about it with friends and other people in this district, have we thought about charging for full-day kindergarten? Because all the districts around us charge. $3,700 a year is a good average. Mundelein, Libertyville, Lincolnshire. Imagine $3,700 times, what's the kindergarten enrollment?
450.
Okay, 450. That's $2 million a year, almost. over 4 years. We're talking almost $10 million right there to do what all the districts around us are doing. We have to stay competitive with those districts, or you're going to have people purchasing houses in those districts. You know, we don't want to fall behind. We want to stay competitive with our, you know, our housing values and the values of our school districts. I've never heard that discussion over the charging. You know, we're talking about this kindergarten building. It's free? It's a question.
So we used to charge, before we went full day, for no extra charge. And I think we only had 2 or 4 classes, so not everybody would take it. So we wouldn't get 450 kids
Maybe not.
paying for it.
However,
Maybe
you're looking at some of these other districts.
maybe 100?
They have a lottery. They have X amount of spaces,
Yep, that's what we did.
right? They have X amount of spaces. Everybody that wants it can't even get in. That's how much they want the full-day kindergarten. That is, you're talking about, you know, up and coming, STEM and STEAM. This is the way it's progressing. 5 years ago, full-day kindergarten was just starting, and that's the way it's going towards. You know, we're even looking, you know, I teach preschool in Lincolnshire. Half-day preschool in 5 years isn't even going to be a thing. We're doing full-day preschool now. So if you look at what the trends are, why are we the only district surrounding that's not going to be charging? You know, you want to stay current and up and coming. That's a lot of money. And, you know, I think you have to think creatively. If you guys are talking about this, right now we're talking dollars. Let's look at the creative ways that we can bring dollars into some of these plans. And I think maybe if we're talking about creative ways to bring these dollars, you might get a little more support. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Renee.
Hi.
I really like the idea of, instead of referring to the plans by the really, really big long names, the red plan and the blue plan. So I just had a couple of marketing strategy ideas. Keep it simple, so title the plan something really short, red plan, blue plan. I love the idea of tagging on estimated cost percentage-wise wherever possible. In addition to that, I would love to see a statement, like a single, like three sentences from the board. Why does the board support this plan? What does the board see as the benefits? What do the administration see as benefits for this plan? What do the teachers see? And I know that comes with a whole ball of wax because I'm one of those people in a different district. But if we could get people within the district who are supportive of the plans to just make those little statements when you send out that information, because the education and the questions and the surveys and the outreach to the community, I think, have brought up a whole lot of things that people didn't understand and just questions to follow up with. Like, you know, like Matt was saying, it's like every time he'd go to a meeting, there'd be more questions that he had. And I think having those questions and having that discussion and the fact that you've taken the time, at least to me, to listen to everybody. And even if we are coming back around to option 1, because in the end, maybe now we know option 1 really was the best. But in the beginning, a lot of us didn't necessarily believe that because we didn't understand how and why. Because some of us see more than a few numbers, and we're like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of numbers. Just because that's not our strength in life, or we don't understand what it's like to be inside a school. And I think addressing those issues through these community forums has been a positive. And I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time with what you've done. And just going forward, it's going to have to be somebody who's in marketing to figure out how to best sell everything to whoever you need to sell it to. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Betsy Sostek. Just wanted to make a quick response to the questions and the discussion that was being had about if
there will be community support for a plan that's very similar to what has gone out there, and then the question about the kindergarten building and support for that. I think that these meetings are very informative with the numbers and projections, all of this information that you're providing, but I do think that for voters and especially for parents in the district, that personal piece is going to be really important. There's a lot of instability and uncertainty right now in the district, and I think that's being felt in the community, but the one thing that people are certain of are the fact that they love their teachers and they love their administrators that are in this district. I'd say 99% of the people I talk to are 100% backing their teachers. So if there is a way that we can have that personal piece added, I don't know if back to school nights or open houses, that we can show, those videos that you'd put together about the space constraints, that it's real right now. Our teachers do an amazing job with the constricted space that they have, but they could do, so much more with these spaces. I think the kindergarten piece as well, the question of that is, for those of us who've been in the district for a while and our kids have been in the district, we did go away from that in the past. And there was a lot of talk about why that was. And just being able to hear from teachers, is that something that they're really behind going back to this because it supports kids educationally? And just having that united front from the district, from teachers, administrators, the board, coming across that this is something that will benefit all of our kids, and having that personal piece, I think will help to sell this to everyone.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No. So, okay, thank you for all your comments. So, as our next step, I think we have the plans, we have the numbers narrowed down. Do we want to focus on one that we can afford, can be broken down in parts, or do we want to keep the other one on, but we can't afford it, and just have, because the biggest moving part on that is 36 million, which is almost all of our 50% of a debt. So we will be kind of pretty out of that at that point. We wouldn't have money saved, we wouldn't have money to do anything else, so that puts us out by a lot. So for the next meeting, if we narrow it down to one plan, we can start going at it line by line. We can start doing the value engineering of the plans that we had. We can start looking for monies that we can save or can't save, how much money we can pull out of our fund balance for it. Can we break this plan down in sections where we can only do, some part of it, the phases of it, look at it in that respect, but we need to find a direction for it so that we can keep moving forward. So if anybody has any thoughts, so we can make the decision, so we can move forward. It's almost 9 o'clock. So, because our next meeting, we don't have any community engagements, but our board meetings are community meetings. They're open for everybody. Everybody can come. We have public comment at that time, because then our next meeting is June 11th, and then we go into the spring, summer sessions. If we want to add community engagement, we definitely will be able to add it, but right now we don't have anything set up on a calendar. This one was the last that we had set up. Our next board meeting is June 11th, and we will be discussing this throughout, going throughout, giving LAMP and DLR direction of what we want from them to help us narrow it down and come to a final decision that we can. It'll be ongoing, and we'll definitely be doing more outreach. We just don't have a plan for it right now to tell you, like what the dates are and everything, but we will, as we go through it, we'll come to that. Go ahead, Matt.
I'm just going to tell you right now, I don't think we really even need to discuss the adaptive reuse, in my opinion.
Okay.
I think we need to just get something whittled down here.
So the adopted EFMP?
Yeah, I'm looking at the timing of this and would like to just get this thing moving. Get the community involved.
Get the community involved. Okay. Anybody else? I lost Julie.
I think I'm with Robin.
My brain hurts. I'm trying to think of our end goal and work backwards from there. End goal being create space for the next 10 years in as fiscally responsible way we can, while still meeting the needs of our students hopefully allowing for even more positive outcomes, but certainly not taking away from outcomes, because that is why we are all here. So I think I am okay letting go of the adaptive reuse plan. I think we definitely need a sexier name than the adopted, updated EFMP. Don't ask me what that name is right now, but I'll come up with it after a full night's sleep.
But if
I ever
anybody
get
comes,
one.
please email it. Comes up with one, we'll take that.
Luke and Leia.
Right. Luke and Leia. So
Luke
Han
and Leia.
Solo. But I do think the feedback about allowing for not only a chart about how it impacts their property taxes, but including Stacy's feedback about kind of line item by line item, how would this impact your taxes? And then you might get an answer of what really is going to have to be whittled away, if anything. I mean, people may say, you know what, we think this is what's best for our students and we'll support it 100%. But if they say, you know what, we think we could chip away at this, this, or this, and we'll give you 42, but we're not giving you 51. I think that would be a good way to set up the chart where people can see how their home value is going to be affected, or how their tax bill is going to be affected per their home value.
And what they will get in that amount, certain amount, like what the line items would be.
Right.
Like, what the differential would be for each thing.
Correct.
Jason?
Just looking at the numbers, I would agree with you guys that the adaptive reuse we can put aside and focus on the EFMP one. The only reason I'm struggling is we haven't heard from the community, because this is more or less the first time they've seen the cost breakdown of it in terms of what's the value proposition of blue versus red. So we're looking at it from you know what, we need to be fiscally responsible. That's kind of where we're somewhat focused right now in terms of we need to hit some of these numbers. We have so much money. Blue meets the plan. It's less expensive, but is there a value proposition on the other plan that we don't see? But again, to Matt's point, do we have time to get that? Do we have time to throw these two numbers out there, pretty much put this out there and say, okay, people, what do you think? That's why I'm struggling, because I want to move forward, but do we have enough information from a value proposition in terms of to make that decision? From a pure bottom line number, I'm with you guys, no doubt about it.
I think we have time. I mean, there's nothing that has to go on the ballot right this second. So there is time, I think, to gather that feedback, but how,
No,
but here's the thing.
One of the
Sorry,
one of the options was, to come up with one of the comments was, why do we support this plan? So I thought it's a very good comment. Why do we support that? Maybe we should come together, put a very succinct piece of information out. This is why we think this is the right one.
And we can do that by June 11th. We can.
For all the reasons. Now, in the meantime, we can put that out and we can say, this is why we support it. But there's this other option out there that was viable. I mean, it did meet our needs. It also is somewhat affordable, but
it's not affordable.
Much less. And then let people understand, okay, here's why we picked these two. And that's part of the marketing in the sense of, we did look at these two very, possible plans. What do you think? And here's our rationale, here's our reason, and do you agree with it?
See, Abe is sick the day we want him because he would have all these numbers on top of his head. I mean, from what all of us know, because we've lived it, we've been in it, we've entrenched in it. The other thing would be, rather than just looking at these numbers, we can start narrowing it down because, every day, every week that we are not, and it might look like there's a lot of time between now, like June 1st to August 28th, it's not a lot of time. It is very little time to do a lot of work as far as this is concerned and get the community outreach and support, including the time that it's summer break and a lot of people will be off, including some of us. So the thing is, we know the adopted EFMP, we know why it is why it is responsible, why it is good, why it meets all our needs. But on the 11th, we can have Abe let us know that the reason why we did not choose, just financially, without the opinion piece in it, he can put it together and tell us at 72 million, what was our debt going to look at for the next 20, 25 years, what was our balance going to look at? What is it something that we could have been able to do? Nothing. And we all know that. And that's why I think we are not able to articulate as fiscally savvy as Abe would have been. And we can have him do that articulation for us on the 11th as to, how going out for that 72, how would it look long-term for the financial picture of the district?
So what if we go forward with that, go with that option, but at the same time, between now and the 11th, throw something out there that says, okay, people, what do you think? A quick survey, it's a week and a half, maybe almost 2 weeks. Is that enough time to get anything meaningful back? It'll be more of a validation that says, yes, we are on the right path, given these two choices. Unless something major comes up that we just have not thought about, I don't see us changing. But see, it's more of a validation of saying, yes, here's why we're going with this, and community.
I'm afraid of survey burnout.
That is the thing. Here is the other thing. Even if it looks like we have a week and a half, we don't. We will not be able to put a red plan and a blue plan and vote for it. Nobody's going to understand that. I mean, the 25 people here will understand it, but nobody else will understand it. So to gather all the information and put everything out there, it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of effort. And kids get out of school on Monday. I mean, nobody's, it's not a lot of time. That's what I'm saying. Like, even between now and the August 28th is not a lot of time, and we need to keep moving forward. We will articulate the best. We will articulate on the 11th, but I don't think we can just put out some things. We've been putting out so many surveys and stuff that.
Okay, I'm good. Just wanted a discussion.
I mean, that's my thing.
Well, I mean, I think the other danger about the survey is, what if you don't get the answer you wanted to hear? Now you're the jerks that went against.
Yeah, we just have to make a decision.
Plus, I mean, am I remembering correctly? Like, if we go with the adaptive reuse, don't we need 2/3 vote? What was that threshold where we would need 2/3 vote?
Yeah,
anything
I believe that was,
Yeah, so, no.
Because the dollar amount that we would ask for.
I'm sorry, where are we getting 67% vote, in favor? I think I kind of forgot about that until just now when you started throwing out that number, but I think the only other suggestion I would make is, I hear what you're saying with technically every meeting is community engagement, because all of our meetings are open to the public unless it's a closed session, but they're open to the public. June 11th is open to the public. You can make a public comment, but I still think it's worth either allowing that one meeting to have a back and forth discussion like we have been in all these meetings, or set up another community engagement meeting, because I think the reason you get people here and you don't get people at our regular meetings is people do not like making a comment and having no idea where it landed. They get no idea if we heard it, if we agree with it, if we disagree, if we think they're crazy, they don't know. So I think that prohibits people from feeling like it's worthwhile to come when you just have to sit there and sit on your hands and not say anything.
Okay, I can tell you right now, and you're not going to like me right now, but I'll tell you, your June 11th meeting is pretty long, so we can't do the back and forth that day. So that day will be a regular board meeting. You have the chance to public comment, but it won't be a town hall style board meeting because we can't do it. We have a lot on our plate for that day. So, but we can make a decision on June 11th if we want to do a community engagement meeting later that week, and we can do that. But for the June 11th meeting, it is not going to be possible, or you're going to hate me because it is a packed meeting on the agenda on what is required, what is in it that day. So, but we can definitely.
That's fine. I just think we need to add another town hall style meeting at some point.
We can definitely add it on June 11th.
Whether it's the week before that or the week after that or whatever.
That'll be the big part of the whole plan of getting the plan out and educating people, getting the numbers out, telling them how it's going to affect them, all that stuff. So yeah, we're going to have a lot of those.
We'll have a lot of those. And so on June 11th, we can decide on, have our calendars and see where we land up. Wes?
Sorry, I forgot. Are you asking me which plan?
Like, are you in, 3 of them said that they're ready to drop the adaptive reuse and go with the adopted EFMP. With a new name, we are going to brand it differently. And
yes, just a couple points that I was going to say is, one, the fact that we have to get the 2/3 majority vote for the referendum is reason enough for me not to move forward with the adaptive reuse. And also, two, with, we still don't know where we're at with the property tax freeze, and we don't know if, what's going on with the pension liability, if that's going to get shifted back on us. So I'm not comfortable with the adaptive reuse.
Okay. So adopted EFMP, is it?
Yes.
I'm also in for that.
Jason has something to add real quick.
I think the 2/3 is only required if we go above our debt limit. So our debt limit, if I read this right, is 62 million.
No, our debt limit for 2023 is
91 million, but we already have 24 outstanding. So I'm just looking at that top row.
Is 45.
No, that's if we only stay below 75% of the debt limit or 50% of the debt limit. If we can hit the debt limit, we can take everything that we can get.
And how much is that?
62 million is what I read. It's that top row, 2018 all the way across. About
net debt limit. But we have some outstanding debt limit. That's our total debt limit, and we have outstanding limit on us.
Correct. So our outstanding debt is 24. Our total limit is 91. So we could borrow another 62. That's how I read that. Correct, right there.
Yeah.
So with 62 million, if we have 12 million that we're willing to spend from reserves, we have 74 million that would go towards it. So the only way we would need the 2/3 vote is if we ask for more than the 62 million, is my understanding.
No, even I think even above a certain limit, I think.
I thought it was just to exceed the limit is when you need 2/3 vote.
No, we have to confirm that.
I wish Abe was here, but I think that was my understanding.
Yeah.
Are you sure you can't call him? Like, what's he sick with? No, I'm just kidding. Wake up, Abe.
No, 2023 is 45. So ad loan capacity is only 26 million at 50% and 49 million at 75%.
So that column that your arrow is on, the net debt limit is what we could borrow. That's the total amount that we could borrow.
That's 69.6.
Yeah, but we don't want to max out, because, that's the point of that 50% and the 75% is, that's our limit, but we don't want to tap into our entire limit at any given time.
I thought it was like once you hit the 75% of that debt limit, that's where you need the 2/3 vote. That's what I thought, is
Maybe
if it
the
pushes you
previous
into
slide
financial
might have
review.
Yeah, we have the
If it pushes you into
previous.
financial review, you had to get the 2/3 vote, is what I thought.
Okay.
But I might be misunderstanding it.
This is?
I thought it might have been one of those slides.
Check with Abe.
Let's check with Abe.
Yeah, we.
Nope, go back. See, limit can be increased. Pass a referendum question with a higher amount by 67% or higher. That's the limit.
Okay.
So our limit right now is 91 million.
Okay, so we haven't hit it. So the question is, are we too close for comfort?
Right at it, in order to afford the
And here is the thing, if we land up with a financial warning, if our score drops, and if our score will drop if we take out more money than the 75%, then we land up under ISB and state watching us.
They watch us. Oh, well, yeah.
Huh? They can watch us?
No,
I don't know.
I just wanted to be clear about the we don't necessarily have to get 2/3 for the other plan.
Okay.
So I make that clear. Because
In case that was somebody's deciding factor.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's
Was
not
that your
necessarily
deciding
the case.
factor, Wes?
No.
Okay.
No,
But it was a factor.
Okay.
But just the amount that, how much we would tap out.
Yeah,
So
we would be,
That would be real
we would
close.
be,
okay, and as Wes mentioned, the other plan, the other thing is also, we need to keep some cash reserves for operational expenses of running our district day to day, as well as we have no idea with the property taxes. They keep going back and forth at the state with the pension liability, they always keep threatening to throw us back. We need to have money. Right now, the thing is, and this is coming out, will come in the budget, we are in deficit spending. And the reason we are in deficit spending is because of our enrollment. It is not because of any mismanagement of stuff, but because we've added about 50 new teachers in the past 5 years to maintain our class sizes and provided services for that enrollment while keeping our revenues have almost stayed steady. That has caused that deficit spending. That deficit spending is not a mismanagement on the part of the board or the administration, and we need to keep that balance. So that $12 million that we keep talking about that we have to give, it leaves very little wiggle room on operational costs and others, and we will have these conversations in utmost depth when Abe is here, starting June 11, because our budget, tentative budgets also go online in June also, because they have to be posted by August. So this is going to go hand in hand with all of that, knowing how much money we have, how much is coming down the pipeline for us, how much new mandates are coming down, and we'll have to do this. So like we said, June 11th is a pretty heavy meeting, so we won't be able to do town hall style, but you're very welcome, and please come and comment. And if you send us email, we are very good at responding, and we'll get all your answers back to you. We'll get it from all our, our experts are really good at getting back all the answers, so you will have the right answers right away, even though it won't be a dialogue. Are we good? Anything else? DLR, anything else? Tom? Thank you guys for coming. Thank you for staying.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
And thank you, everybody, for coming and for your comments. And yes.
I'll second that.
Motion by Robin, seconded by Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. 5 ayes, 0 nays. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.